very similar to the customs of Yom
They've never had a bar mitzvah. Imagine.
Austin, in Texas. That was actually the first time.
Was flown in 1997.
Thank you very much, and we're going to start our presentation in some medical information, maybe historical information. First of all, circumcision is the surgical removal of the foreskin of the penis, and the foreskin itself is the fold of the skin that covers the glands or the end of the penis. Circumcision of infant males has been practiced for thousands of years, even before the time of Avraham Avinu, by many tribes. We'll see it in a minute. Historically, circumcision has been done for religious, social, and medical reasons. According to the WHO, they estimate that among all the males in the entire world, 30% are circumcised today. You can see it in the slides that today in America, between 60 to 90% of males born annually in the USA are circumcised. Let's go back to some history. We can see in the next slide very interesting picture which was made over 4,000 years ago, before the time of Abraham, before the time of Avraham Avinu. You can see that it's ancient adult male circumcision was done in Egypt, and the high society of the Egyptian, many of them were circumcised then. It might help us to understand when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when God ordered Avraham Avinu, go and do circumcision, he knew what he's talking about, because it was not a new procedure, it was already an old procedure done in those days. In Europe, mostly in the Catholic lands, there is only very few circumcised males among the population. But we're dealing about simple people. When you are trying to think what happens in the royal families, we see very interesting facts. Some of them are pure medical, some of them are slightly mysterious. Let's look in the 18th century, know about kings in France, King Louis XVI, and the same century, the Tsar Peter III in Russia. Both monarchs suffered from a medical condition called phimosis, we'll discuss it later, which required circumcision in order to allow them to consummate their marriage. So this was purely medical indication for these two monarchs, and they went through the procedure of circumcision. But very interesting, the Catholic land, Spain, in the beginning of the 20th century, you know that Queen Anna's son, Prince Alfonso, was discovered to be hemophilic during his circumcision. It's a little bit mystery why in Spain, in the royal family, they went through the procedure of circumcision. I can give you a hint for this mystery. Queen Anna was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria from England. And in England, it's a different story, as we can see in the next slide. In England, the royal house has a long tradition requiring that all male children be circumcised by Jewish Moel of London. For example, in 1948, the circumcision of Prince of Wales, Charles, took place at Buckingham Palace by Rabbi Jacob Snowman, the official Moel of the London Jewish community. So, let's go back to the Jewish Brit Milah. If we'll use the word circumcision for the medical procedure, medical operation, we'll use Brit Milah for the mitzvah of Brit Milah. It's the second commandment written in the Torah, is the Brit Milah. The first one is be fruitful and multiply. It's a covenant between Israel and its Father in heaven. And the Brit is a mitzvah that tied to the very identity of Jewish nation. If we can see in the slides how it's written in the Torah, translated to English, זאת בריתי אשר תשמרו ביני וביניכם ובין זרעך אחיך הימול לכם כל זכר. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Throughout the generations, many of our people have put their lives on the line to fulfill it. Jews began to sacrifice themselves for the sake of Brit Milah more than 2,000 years ago during the tyrannical leadership of Antiochus, time of the Hashmonaim, and the period of Shmad under the Romans. In our days, they did the same in the Holocaust, in certain places, certain times. But we are circumcising ourselves, our children, our sons, because it's a commandment, it's a mitzvah, which is written in the Torah. It has very interesting positive side effects to this mitzvah. Some of them are classical and some of them are quite new. We know that there are medical benefits for the circumcision. It's not the reason to go and to act and to do the mitzvah, but we should not forget these positive side effects. The first is decreased risk of urinary tract infections in children. It reduced risk of some sexually transmitted disease in men. And there is magnificent protection against penile cancer, maybe 99 or maybe 99.99% of protection, and reduced risk of cervical cancer of the female partner. And it also prevents some other diseases, some of them we mentioned before when we discussed the circumcision of Peter III and Louis XVI. It's prevent balanitis, prosthesis, phimosis, paraphimosis, and the risk for the procedure is very, very, very low. Before we get into the AIDS, I want to add another fact. In the United States, during the last 50 years, about 12,000 people died from cancer of the penis. 99% or maybe 99.9% of them were not circumcised, which means we can be sure today that over 10,000 people saved their lives during the last 50 years just because they were circumcised by their parents when they were born. This is the classic positive side effects of circumcision. But today we know much more, and today I mean during the last 2 years, 2005 and 2006. During the last 30 years, experts in epidemiology found out that in many countries, neighboring countries, the incidence of AIDS, of HIV infection, has a great difference. And they found out that countries where many of their males were circumcised, the incidence of AIDS was very low. This was only something that we found out. It doesn't prove anything. But 3 great trials were done in the last few years, and they were concluded during the last 2 years. 3 prospective randomized controlled trials in South Africa, in Kenya, in Uganda, found out that male circumcision reduced the risk of acquiring HIV infection by 2 to 2.5 times, which means reduction rate of 50 to 60%. There is no any medical means in the world today that can cause such high reduction of acquiring HIV. And let's go back to Spain. We ask question, how come in the Catholic land of Spain they circumcised the prince? As I mentioned before, His mother, Queen Anna, was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria, where in the English royal family it was a rule that all males should be circumcised. In the next slides, you can see a very interesting picture, which I would say is the symbol of the cooperation between the WHO, World Health Organization, and the UNAIDS organization in Africa for the control studies and for the fights against AIDS. We believe today that it is possible to prevent millions of deaths per year. For example, we know today that there are over 40 million people who have already in the body the AIDS virus, the HIV. Every year in the entire world, about 5 million of people are dying from AIDS. And we know today that by routine circumcising of infants around the world, especially in countries where do not have so many males circumcised and they have very high incidence of male, we can prevent more than 5 million deaths every year or every 2 years just by circumcision of the infants in these countries. It's very important to notice that the WHO announced just a month ago, a month and a half, 6 weeks ago, very important announcement after they had a special conference held. And the conclusion is very simple, that male circumcision should be part of a comprehensive HIV preventing package. A few months before, we had a special conference in Jerusalem. Representatives of the WHO and UNAIDS came from Europe to study and to learn from the Israeli experience. In Israel, every year we are performing over 60,000 circumcisions in the infants who are born in this country. In Israel, every year there is over 110,000 of Jewish children who are born here. 50% of them, 51% of them are males, and 99% of them are being circumcised. So the WHO decided to send some delegates to this conference in order to study and to learn from the Israeli experience. And what we found out, that it may be the cheapest way to prevent AIDS by circumcising the infants. It's much more expensive and much more dangerous to circumcise adults. But still, even though there are more side effects, still, when you weigh the benefits and the risks, it's still worth even to circumcise young adults, in order to reduce their chance to be circumcised. So as we said before, as Jewish people, we are circumcising our children because it's a commandment of God, commandments of our Father in heaven. But we have good side effects. And this means that any country today, European or other, that by law or by other means preventing circumcision today, it's equal to endangering the population of this country. So, as I mentioned, that there is no reason whatsoever today to any modern country to prevent infant circumcision, even if we are dealing just about the fight, the worldwide fight against the epidemic of AIDS. So, it's very interesting. As Jewish people, we are ordered to circumcise our infants. But there is very strong phrase in the Torah against somebody who is not circumcising himself or his children. And והערל זכר אשר לא ימול את בשר עורלתו ונכרתה הנפשעים מעמיה את בריתי יפר. And the uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. What is the mechanism of this punishment? Maybe it might be an HIV infection. We don't know, and we have to remember it. So to summarize, when the Rambam Maimonides, 800 years ago, was trying to give reasons to many of the mitzvot that we are ordered to do. Many of them, he gave medical reasons, health reasons for them. But for circumcision, he gave symbolic reasons. He said it's a kind of a symbol in order to show that we are one nation, that we are united. He didn't bring any medical reasons for that mitzvah of circumcision. Why didn't he do it? There are a few possibilities. One of them, maybe in his days, nobody knew the medical advantages of circumcision. Today we know them. Another explanation, that he didn't want to bring these reasons, because the mitzvah of this covenant between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's even above all the good side effects of the medical circumcision. So, this we understand the Rambam. If we can learn, go back a little bit. For Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, 900 years ago, he also gave some reasons for the mitzvah of circumcision. And he also gave a symbolic explanation. See, what circumcision really is. It's very, very simple surgery. It's only cutting a piece of fold of skin. We're not doing any damage to any organ. We are cutting a fold of skin. Where? In a very delicate and important organ. An organ which symbolized our continuation, next generation. An organ, then we have to take power in it, not to let this organ pulling us to where the organ itself sometimes pulls. So it's another symbolic way to look at the circumcision as a mitzvah, symbolic mitzvah, even beyond all the medical. So we have learned today some of the reasoning beyond the mitzvah of Brit Milah. We learned today about the medical effect of circumcision, of the medical procedure of circumcision. We saw, as you can see in the last slides, which we have over here, the WHO announcement from the end of March this year, and we have learned that it's a great part of the fight against the severe HIV infection, the AIDS disease.